And now for some few interesting facts and figures about ourselves. It's all taken from the latest census and it makes some really interesting reading. For example, now more of us, it seems, are living in rented homes, and most people in Leicester and Nottingham, they don't actually own their own homes. But the census also found a sharp increase in car ownership across the East Midlands. Tens of thousands of people here now also have holiday homes. Who knew that? Here's our social affairs correspondent, Jeremy Ball.
Is the home-owning dream an aspiration that's increasingly out of reach? Today's census data is the story of how we're living has changed in the last decade. Here's the big picture across the East Midlands government region. 2/3 of our properties are still owner-occupied, but there's been a 2% shift away from ownership, fuelled by a large rise in private property rentals. Renting's most common in Nottingham. 54% of properties there are occupied by tenants. Debt advisors in Nottingham say that's causing huge pressure because demand has pushed the city's private rental rates well above housing benefit limits. One local academic spent years campaigning for better housing.
If you walk around Nottingham, it's full of cranes, full of new building works, but none of it is being built for people who live in Nottingham. They are for new student villages, and they are for penthouse luxury flats that will all be sold off plan, and then they'll be rented out at a price that people from Nottingham can't afford.
Developments like this one on the city's island site, where they're building halls of residence for hundreds of students. They'll contribute to Nottingham's economy, but it's changing the face of the city. Leicester's a rental hotspot too, and today's census data shows properties there are most likely to be overcrowded, a world away from Rushcliffe and Derbyshire Dales, where most people have spare rooms. Across the East Midlands, 3/4 of our homes are classed as under-occupied. Most of the others have just enough rooms, but 3% are classed as overcrowded. In Leicester, overcrowding rises to 12% of properties in a city where foreign workers are often crammed into shared houses. That's why extra homes are badly needed. But where do they go? Plans to develop the old Western Park golf course in Leicester are prompting strong opposition. Tackling the housing crisis has consequences, and there aren't simple solutions.
Jeremy's with me now. I mean, some households clearly struggling, but others are doing quite well too.
Yeah, first of all, and that sharp rise in car ownership here in the East Midlands, the number of households with at least 2 vehicles has gone up by 21%. You might remember the census asked us all whether we've got a holiday home as well. Over 31,000 people across this region said they got one of their own. And there's been a sharp drop too in the numbers of people without central heating. Still 23,000 households across this region, and that includes 3,000 who rely on wood fires. Also, some really interesting data on shared accommodation here in the East Midlands. Students living together, they've actually gone up by 37% in the last decade. The number of prison inmates, that's risen by 30%. But surprisingly, perhaps, when you look at care home residents, that number has fallen by 9%. And obvious questions there about how much that's linked to the pandemic.